Hey everyone, Dan Dog Crypto. So we've had a couple of bank collapse, but certainly one that is apparent to hurt the crypto USDC, which certainly has created a cascade effect on our stable coin, which is SVB. Well, the $3 billion will circle. The reason that it's lost its peg at this present time is because Circle had 8% of its reserves in Silicon Valley Bank. So that's why when we look at what has happened with USDC, where it's lost its peg, well, certainly what's happened if you're on a centralized exchange, USDC, you can move it out, but you're not able to transact until the banks open up on Monday. But everything is relevant to how much pressure ends up being put to redeem, and do they halt. In a DeFi setting, you were able to preserve and save, make moves if you believe that the peg would certainly dislodge further. But also DAI, the reason it's lost its peg because it too had a percentage of its collateral in USDC. Decentralized finance, banking, as we know, what happens is when money is held in the bank, and as I've been stating, it's an IOU. Unfortunately, as this happened, well, money has to go somewhere, and if it's going into Bitcoin or is it Ethereum or others, as long as it's decentralization. But the other factor ends up being, is there large whale positions that dominate an ecosystem, and what is the narrative? That's why the market is running correlated to a market that is controlled by legacy. Once they enter in the system, are they trying to correlate it? They create life-changing events as money enters into an ecosystem. But as we saw with USDC, as money was transferred out, so preserving and trying to save, you enter into any other protocol. But the key thing is, where do we go? And you want to be in true DeFi, decentralization. We had the Silvergate collapse. Well, this here, and they're giving back their deposits money, but they're shutting down the operation. And sometimes you hear, is it a choke point? Are they shutting down your on and off ramps? As I've been stating, is the on and off ramps, which are key. And so we know that legislation and certain personalities have been urging for stable coin regulations. But when you have a stable coin and you have this reserve, so in this case, Silvergate, what it represented is for exchanges to be able to interact with physical real money. So they had accounts with them, but that was a choke point at this time. So Silvergate has been taken out. And then Silicon Valley, there's going to be certainly a cascading effect from this effect. Yes, the $3 billion, but that's what was held. So the reserve, and with SVB, what now you have treasuries. Well, because of the raising interest rate, these treasury bonds, once they needed to sell them, you have to convert it into cash. Now all of a sudden there's a major loss. But yet what happens now is they have to realize this loss. But because there's a run on the bank, well, they just don't have the reserves. So now they've been halted. Well, there's a cascade effect across the board. So now whatever entity interacted and had large sums of value with this Silvergate, are they going to be able to meet their obligations? So at any point when you have to collateralize in a centralization, if there's a failure in that centralization, you're going to get a cascade effect because of the dominoes as they fall. So as individuals, yes, we have 250,000, but if that occurs, there's going to be a process. But the key thing is large entities and centralization, and that's why decentralization, where you can interact and move money in and out of an ecosystem, and if you're going to transact with USDC. But these choke points that are happening, once you're in, you're able to interact, but you have central parties that are trying to control what enters into an ecosystem, because this ecosystem certainly is the future and is the present. Everything is headed this way, but it's controlling the flow and slowing down the process of the technology. But where do you head? And as I've stated, well, certainly I've always believed that Hex was a better Bitcoin, whether you want to call it mining for Hex, and certainly it's really what is happening is the code allows you to have something because the code identifies. So with Hex, when you interact with the code, you're really self-yielding. The self-yielding that occurs is through T-shares. So you're able to generate a yield based on a lockup. So you create this staking ladder based on cycles and your time horizon. But there has to be some type of lockup from 1 day to 15 years. This is a self-yielding protocol that generates income. Holding the liquid asset, you're just hoping for Hex to go up. So Hex is also decentralization, and it certainly has been kept or gate-capped. When Hex started, the possibilities and the code, and calling it pumpamentals. So these pumpamentals, which are key, which created a 10,000x. Well, what we have is PZEN now is an alternative to a lockup. You're generating a yield, and it's a self-yielding protocol because of the code. So this code, and we say it's a Web3, and everything in the internet, it's going to have an identity. So Web3 creates a financial vehicle, which creates an income-producing asset held in a decentralized wallet. So if you hold PZEN, PZEN is the fuel to allow you to earn continuous compounding. Now, with PZEN, the magic of it is the amount you have. So more PZEN, that's what allows you to generate your yield based on a pay-it-forward redistribution, which is the 2%. It's self-yielding because the code, your interaction with the code, and that's your interaction. The code allows you to get a redistribution. It's a fair economic economy. The key thing with PZEN is the anti-whale function. It creates a fair and equitable distribution on an accumulation and a redistribution when you decide to take profits. But what happens at this point is the fuel is PZEN. So PZEN generates more PZEN held in a decentralized wallet. And certainly in these economic times, banks collapsing, trying to get collateralized, you still have to do one thing, money had to be generated, had to be held in a centralized exchange. They converted it to these treasury bonds that now, because the Federal Reserve is raising rates, creating massive pressure because of being able to meet these liabilities and liquidity being strangled. So decentralization, putting something in a decentralized protocol because it's your interaction. Being early always gives you the most gains. Hex did a 10,000x, and anyone that understood being early, yes, someone may want to take and receive profits, but being early and test of time, which ends up being time in the market. So the most gains are made early. PZEN is designed to do a 10,000x. It certainly will, most likely, based on the economics of it, on how it's designed. You have certain forces. You're creating a network effect. That's how crypto started. So this network effect, which ends up being the holders, that's Metcalfe's law and the multiplier. But also you have major other factors because the Zenites are holding. As they hold, so now in order to interact, you have to interact with your decentralized protocol. Well, now that's the pool. What is the perceived value? You have another force that comes into effect, which is Newton's law, which is mass with force, because you're reducing the supply. So you're going to naturally have economic mass to the upside. We have another force, which is early, because we have the burn function. You're reducing the supply on each interaction, the 0.01%. So whether it's a buy, a sell, or a transfer, the reduction. So this reduction in supply, but the supply or the float is already limited. So now, based on someone's time horizon and their need and the psychology of a market, so now, how long does someone hold as a cycle occurs? But if people understand the economic forces that are occurring with PZEN and know that time in the market will create an income based on each redistribution, a fair and equitable distribution for all that interact in the PulseZen ecosystem, where we certainly know that wealth is not scarce. It transfers, as we've seen it, apparent with USDC and other cryptos. So it's going to enter into an ecosystem. And if someone wants to preserve their buying power, you either generate a yield or you interact with something that has a possibility, odds of probabilities to do a 10,000x. And those forces are apparent in PulseZen, especially in these economic times where the uncertainty. So PulseZen ecosystem, I believe, is definitely an early opportunity, but it's apparent. You see what is happening as this market uncertainty with USDC. We're starting to see that the peg is starting to stabilize. But if you hold large percentages, the uncertainty, you would move it. So where does it go? It has to find a home. So does it go into the larger protocols? Well, it all depends how much funds one needs to use and to transact with. But remember, the volume with PZEN is increasing. So more eyes on PZEN certainly creates Newton's law. That's how crypto started. So Newton's law is apparent that it starts to create a multiplier. But as I had stated, when I said there was 56 million PZEN tokens, right now there is 50 million PZEN tokens. When you look at it, you have to analyze what is happening. And modest distribution, but now there is an accumulation. So now the anti-whale function creates an accumulation, and it takes time. But the upside potential is massive based on the accumulation. Well, certainly does someone take a distribution and exit and take possible profits. But anyone that understands time and the power of compounding continuous frequencies that occur, and it's compound at an annual growth rate, that's how you determine a yield. You can't determine it any sooner than that because you have a transaction and the variable which ends up being the volume. So now as PZEN, the interaction, so we had a minor cell which was 489 PZEN. But when you look at it and you take a look, and we're at 0.0047 from when I stated it was certainly an opportunity, but even during that first cycle when it hit a penny and there was a distribution that people were taking their distribution or their benefits, it still was an early opportunity because anyone that was in received this distribution and received more PZEN, generating a yield. So you had a present value, your principal, but what is the future value? The future value of PZEN, that's the perceived value. But now, as we see, there is 50 million PZEN plus. At any time, this supply can create massive upside explosion. Well, now it all depends on the Genesis wallets, the perceived value. And sometimes people will exit a system or will they take minor profits. But PZEN is certainly designed to do a 10,000x because of the amount that originally started, which was 880 million on a redistribution. So there's been an accumulation that has been occurring. So now as this accumulation occurs on a continuous compounding cycle, it is early in the journey. As more I see it, we're creating a network effect, but what economic mass is needed to move PZEN dramatically to the upside? So the anti-whale function works both ways on an accumulation and a redistribution of receiving and taking profits because it's fair both ways. But the mass to the upside, that's Newton's law. And this is truly designed based on the code self-yielding because your interaction with your decentralized wallet. PulseZen is early, and there are many protocols. Not one will just survive. There will be many. And if anyone understands the wealth transfer and understand that values just go up and down, and anyone that has economic mass will want to transfer, generate a yield, but create a mass to the upside. But before that occurs, there's always an accumulation. PULSECHAIN is early, certainly do your homework, because the first cycle of it reaching 1 penny is irrelevant. It is early. And as more accumulation occurs and understanding the value, the perceived value, what is the future value, but economic mass, and that wealth transfers because it is not scarce. And anyone that understands that will create a life-changing event. Time in the market, not timing the market. Stay the course. Stay calm. Stay relaxed, even in these uncertain times. Because decentralized finance, nothing has happened. Centralized finance, that's where the issue is. Even with the stable coin, centralization, trying to create stability, failure in that system has created uncertainties again, which is centralization. That's why you have to stay in a DeFi, decentralized. Very, very crucial, because that truly presents freedom, economic freedom, and you're able to hold your asset in a decentralized wallet. Wish you the best. Talk to you soon.